You know how some decisions just sit with you? Not haunting exactly, but humming in the back of your mind like a low-grade electrical current. For me, that hum started the day I shook my father's hand over a piece of land known locally and ominously as the Mire. My father, Frank, was a man carved from old-growth timber and stubborn pride. He was a retired contractor who had amassed a small, scattered portfolio of local real estate over the years. Most of it was decent, if unremarkable. Rental properties, a small commercial space, and a few vacant lots that were solid investment hedges. Then there was the Mire. It wasn't technically a mire, just a severely neglected 5-acre plot nestled in a valley bend of the old county road about an hour out of the city. It was swampy in the spring, baked and cracked in the summer, and dense with impenetrable thorny undergrowth year-round. It was the kind of land that developers drove past without slowing down. The name Dangerous Plot wasn't official, of course, but that's what the neighbors called it. It had been sitting on his books, costing him minimal property tax, for nearly 20 years. Every few years, he'd try to offload it, but the environmental reports always came back with complicated, expensive caveats about drainage and soil composition. My connection to it was less about investment and more about nostalgia and necessity. I was 35, working a soul-crushing remote tech job that paid well but left me creatively bankrupt. What I really wanted was a place to build. Not a fancy house, but maybe a workshop, a small cabin, a space to actually get my hands dirty. I'd mentioned this dream to my father one rainy Sunday afternoon while we were sipping coffee, looking out at the endless suburban sprawl. "You want to build something?" he'd grunted, stirring his coffee with deliberate slowness. "I've got 5 acres nobody wants. Perfect for a folly." I laughed, knowing he meant the Mire. "That swamp? Dad, even a folly needs a dry foundation." "The front half's dry enough for a small structure," he insisted, his eyes suddenly lighting up with that particular spark men get when they see a chance to make a deal. "The back half is drainage hell. I'll give you that. But it's yours if you want it, for a price." Now, my father wasn't known for giving things away. Everything had a value, and every transaction was a lesson. I braced myself for the typical family discount. Market price minus 5%, followed by a lecture on compound interest. "How much?" I asked, leaning forward. He took a slow sip of coffee, put the mug down, and looked me dead in the eye. $1,000. My jaw practically dropped. $1,000. 5 acres of land, even famously dangerous land, usually started at 10 times that amount in the area, even with severe environmental limitations. It was a throwaway price, a symbolic gesture. "Dad, what's the catch?" I asked, suspicious. He scoffed. "No catch. I'm tired of paying the tax, and you're tired of sitting on your butt talking about building things. Consider it seed money, and a nuisance off my ledger. But you take it as is. You handle the transfer, the lawyer, the whole 9 yards. Once the deed is in your name, it's your problem, rain or shine, mire or miracle." The formal sale took 3 weeks. It was straightforward but tedious, involving countless forms confirming I understood the liability of the poor drainage and potential for instability. On the closing day, he met me at the county clerk's office, signed the papers, and accepted the single cashier's check for $1,000. It was the cheapest, most momentous real estate transaction of my life. "Welcome to land ownership, kid," he'd said, giving me a rare, firm pat on the shoulder. "Don't go sinking any bulldozers in that back acreage." For the next 3 months, the Mire was my obsession. I started small. I hired a local surveyor to mark the boundaries properly, confirming what Dad had said. The front 2 acres were relatively flat and solid, suitable for building a small structure. The remaining 3 acres, the true Mire, ran down a gentle slope into a dense wetland area that bordered a largely untouched municipal reserve. My plan wasn't grand. I wanted to clear the front 2 acres myself, using a rented mini excavator and a lot of sweat. I spent every weekend there, hacking away at the thicket of invasive species and dragging out decades of dumped refuse. It was grueling, dirty work, but strangely therapeutic. I was exchanging digital stress for physical exhaustion. The more I worked, the more I came to appreciate the land's hidden character. It was quiet, unnervingly so, save for the buzz of insects and the distant rush of traffic on the main road. The trees that had managed to survive the neglect were old and magnificent, casting long, peaceful shadows. I even started to respect the wetland area, which, despite its difficulties, was teeming with wildlife. Frogs, turtles, and wading birds I couldn't identify. It was a small, wild pocket, surviving right next to suburbia. I kept my father updated on my progress, mostly to preempt his inevitable critiques. He'd listen, nod, and occasionally offer an unsolicited, technically questionable piece of advice about septic systems. His interest seemed polite, detached. The land was officially out of his life, and he seemed relieved to be done with it. Around the beginning of the 3rd month, I finished the initial clearing of the front 2 acres. I'd managed to create a large, level patch of ground where my workshop would eventually stand. I took a photo, muddy boots, sweat-soaked shirt, and a huge pile of brush behind me, and sent it to my dad with the caption, "Foundation ready." He replied simply, "Good. Now, I need you to do me a favor on the back lot." This was unusual. Dad never asked for favors related to the Mire once the deal was done. He had made it clear it was entirely my burden. I need to settle a very old, very stupid dispute with an old associate, he explained on the phone the next day, his voice tight with unusual nervousness. It involves the exact boundary line on the southern corner of your property, that swampy part. Apparently, decades ago, there was a minor disagreement about a buried marker. I want to prove him wrong, once and for all. Can you just walk the line back there with a metal detector? See if you hit anything significant near the old oak? I hesitated. The back lot was dangerous. Thick mud, dense thorns, and a high likelihood of finding nothing but rusty old farm equipment. But I owed him. He had practically given me the land. "Sure, Dad, I'll take a look this weekend. But if I get stuck, you're paying the tow truck." "Fair enough," he said, and hung up quickly. Too quickly. It wasn't until I was standing out on the Mire a few days later, sweating under the late summer sun, that the oddity of his request truly registered. It wasn't about a boundary dispute. My father never cared about minor boundary disputes. He only cared about money, and whatever was buried near that old oak was clearly worth more than $1,000 to him now. I walked down the gentle slope toward the municipal reserve, the air growing heavy and damp. The dense, wild growth was a wall I had to push through. When I finally reached the boundary near the ancient, gnarled oak, I fired up the cheap, borrowed metal detector. I passed it slowly over the damp, uneven earth, expecting the telltale whine of a nail or a can. But what I heard, just 3 months after buying the dangerous plot for a dollar store price, was a deep, sustained, insistent tone. I started digging, and that's when the nightmare and the opportunity truly began. The sustained signal from the metal detector was unlike any noise I'd heard while clearing the front lot. Nails, screws, and rusted rebar gave off a high, choppy whine. This was a low, resonant drone, a sound that spoke of something large, dense, and non-ferrous, perhaps deep beneath the surface. My heart, which had been beating the steady rhythm of physical labor, suddenly kicked into the frantic tempo of anticipation. I dropped the detector and grabbed the small, folding military shovel I'd brought. The ground here, closer to the wetland border, was a mixture of sticky clay and deep, moist loam. It smelled earthy, almost sweet, with a strong overlay of decomposition. Digging was slow, messy work, complicated by the thick, interwoven roots of the invasive shrubs. Every time I thought I made progress, I hit another stubborn root ball. After about 20 minutes of intense, focused digging, with sweat stinging my eyes and my muscles screaming, the shovel finally scraped against something solid. It wasn't the dull thunk of a rock, but a muffled, hollow clack. I knelt down and started clearing the dirt away by hand. The object was rectangular, roughly the size of a large suitcase, but clearly metallic. It was heavily encrusted with decades of mud and mineral deposits, giving it a mottled, dark brown appearance. As I continued to excavate, I realized it wasn't just a box. It was a chest, and it was bolted shut with heavy oxidized clasps. It was also incredibly heavy. Even after clearing the soil from its sides, I couldn't budge it more than an inch. This was clearly the significant thing my father wanted me to find. A boundary marker? Not unless he was trying to mark the county line with a time capsule from a shipwreck. Whatever it was important enough for him to go back on his "it's your problem now" stance, and my $1,000 plot suddenly seemed a lot more complicated. The sun was starting to dip below the ridge, casting long, spooky shadows across the mire. Working alone in that dense, isolated spot, wrestling with a mysterious buried chest, felt less like a treasure hunt and more like the beginning of a bad horror movie. I needed better light, better tools, and frankly, a better plan. I recovered the chest quickly, using loose soil and the thick mulch I'd excavated, masking the digging site as best I could. The anonymity of the place was suddenly feeling like a crucial advantage. The drive home was a blur. My mind raced, trying to formulate a rational explanation. Was it old family silver? Stolen loot from a forgotten local bank robbery? Or was it what my gut whispered? Something far older, far more valuable, and potentially far more dangerous than simple cash. I called my dad, trying to sound casual. "Hey Dad, I was poking around near the oak. Didn't hit anything that looked like a conventional boundary marker, just a lot of old junk." His voice was immediately guarded. "Define junk, son." "Just metal. Big piece of metal. Probably some old rusted equipment. Too heavy to move. What exactly was your associate claiming was out there?" He hesitated. A long, telling pause. "It doesn't matter now. Just leave it be for a while. I'll settle it my own way." His sudden lack of interest, after forcing me out there, spoke volumes. He knew I'd found something, and he wanted me to back off. That was all the confirmation I needed. I wasn't just clearing a field. I was sitting on a secret, and the $1,000 I paid him, it suddenly felt like the biggest, cruelest bargain of my life. The next morning, I returned, armed with a better shovel, a crowbar, and a healthy dose of paranoia. I parked my truck further up the road, making the hike in longer but less conspicuous. Uncovering the chest again, I realized the full extent of its construction. It was cast iron, reinforced with thick steel bands, and the heavy clasps were secured with a lock, a massive antique padlock that was fused solid with rust. I spent the next hour working carefully with the crowbar, aiming to break the fused clasps rather than the chest itself. Finally, with a loud, metallic shriek that echoed unnervingly in the quiet woods, one of the clasps snapped. A few minutes later, the second one gave way. The lock remained, but the lid was now partially free. With adrenaline pumping, I leveraged the crowbar one last time and pried the lid open. A rush of stale, damp air, smelling faintly of old paper and copper, escaped. The chest wasn't filled with gold bars or jewels. It was packed with heavy, thick canvas wrapped tightly around various objects, all resting on a bed of what looked like compacted clay and desiccated leaves. I pulled out the first canvas bundle. Inside, wrapped in oilskin, was a collection of instruments. A very old, heavy compass with a brass casing, a rusted sextant, and a pair of spectacles with thick lenses and wire frames. They looked like something a 19th century explorer might carry. The second bundle was smaller, and when I unwrapped it, I finally felt the true gravity of the discovery. It was a journal, bound in leather that had been remarkably preserved by the oilskin wrapping. The pages inside were thin and brittle, covered in neat looping script in dark, fading ink. The date on the first page read, October 14th, 1898. But the most important object was the last one, nestled at the bottom of the chest. It was a map, rolled tightly and tied with a piece of brittle twine. It wasn't a county map or a deed. It was a geological survey map, drawn on thick, treated paper, and it was only partially legible. Much of the ink had bled or faded, but the topographical lines were clear, showing the bend of the valley, the municipal reserve, and critically, my mire. Scrawled in red ink across the back acreage, the swampy, worthless part my father had warned me about, were three bold, almost frantic annotations. The first was a large X near the old oak. The second was a symbol that looked like a cluster of grapes or bubbles. And the third, the one that made my blood run cold, was a single scrawled word, vein. I sat back on the damp earth, the map crinkling in my hands. This wasn't a boundary dispute. This was a record, a century-old testament to something buried deep beneath the dangerous plot. My $1,000 purchase wasn't just a piece of land, it was the entry point to a forgotten natural treasure. And judging by my father's panicked call, I knew exactly why he had sold it to me so cheap. He had only just remembered, or perhaps finally confirmed, what lay beneath, and he wanted it back. The word vein scrawled on the map demanded an immediate, focused investigation. I quickly reburied the chest, took photos of the map, and left the mire. I couldn't risk analyzing something this volatile on the property itself. The potential implications of that single word were enormous, and I needed to understand what a 19th century surveyor might have meant by it in this specific forgotten valley. Back at my apartment, I spread the photocopied map out on my desk, comparing it to modern satellite imagery and geological surveys I pulled up online. The old map wasn't just topographical, it was remarkably detailed for its age, showing drainage patterns and subtle elevation changes that matched the current landscape perfectly. The X was where I found the chest. The cluster of bubbles symbol, the one that looked like grapes, was located further back, right at the edge of the municipal reserve, deep within the wet, thick tangle of the mire that was supposedly unstable and worthless. This was the area labeled vein. I spent the rest of the evening cross-referencing the journal, written by a man named Elias Kincaid. Elias wasn't a land surveyor in the modern sense. He was a geologist and amateur botanist who had been exploring the region just before the turn of the century, a time when the entire area was being logged and divided. His journal entries were poetic, describing the flora and fauna, but his final entries shifted dramatically in tone, becoming technical, obsessed, and increasingly paranoid. October 28, 1898. The deep clay holds it, refusing easy extraction. The water flow masks the true structure. It is unlike anything I have encountered on this continent. The density, the peculiar crystalline structure. The old men's tales were not of gold, but of a different, more liquid fire. November 5th, 1898. Have taken samples. The color is wrong. It is too pure, too vivid. The local streams are tainted, but gently. I must secure the documentation. This land will be parceled and sold to loggers by spring. If this is exposed now, it will be lost to industry and folly. The only way to preserve it is to bury the proof and pray for a more enlightened generation. The mire protects it best. The phrase, "a different, more liquid fire," sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't gold or coal or oil, the typical treasures of the late 1800s. It was something Elias felt needed to be hidden, something potentially fragile and certainly valuable enough to fear industrial exploitation. The next morning, I reached out to an old acquaintance, Dr. Lena Hansen, a retired geology professor who specialized in local mineral history. I told her I was working on a historical land survey project and needed help deciphering a cryptic, century-old map showing a vein in an unexpected area. I carefully omitted the $1,000 price tag, the chest, and my father's involvement. I showed her the photocopied map section with the vein annotation and the cluster of grapes symbol. Lena spent an hour examining the lines, tapping her pen thoughtfully. "The topography here," she finally said, pointing to the spot, "suggests a geological anomaly. The surrounding area is typical sedimentary rock, but this specific zone, right on the boundary of the reserve, shows signs of a localized intrusion." "What kind of intrusion?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "In this area, a localized intrusion, particularly one near a high water table and marshland, could indicate a few things. The symbols here, the bubbles, that's what makes it interesting. In old geological shorthand, that often refers to a thermal signature, or more commonly, a natural hydrocarbon seep. But the shape is wrong for crude oil." She leaned in closer, tracing the boundary of the mire. "However, given the proximity to this specific type of ancient granite bedrock near the reserve and the historical period, if it's not hydrocarbons, there is one other possibility that used to be talked about in hushed tones around here, but it's never been confirmed in this county." "What is it?" "A mineral called Celestine," she stated, using the technical name, "or what lay people called sky stone. It's strontium sulfate, and it typically occurs in sedimentary rock. It forms beautiful blue crystals. It was often mined in the 1800s, not for its beauty, but because strontium has a very specific, intense quality. When heated, it produces a vivid, almost liquid crimson color, a different, more liquid fire. The phrase from the journal echoed in my mind. Why would someone call that a natural treasure and hide it? Lena shrugged. In the 1890s, Celestine was vital. It's the primary source of strontium, used back then almost exclusively for fireworks and signal flares. That intense, stunning red. But the real value was its rarity and purity. A high-grade, accessible vein of Celestine, even a small one, would have been an industrial gold mine. It would have meant a full-scale quarry, massive logging, and environmental devastation to this valley. Elias Kincaid, if he was a conservationist, may have literally buried the secret to protect the land. The pieces were snapping together with terrifying clarity. My dangerous plot wasn't dangerous because of mud. It was dangerous because of what the mud concealed. A forgotten, century-old vein of rare mineral wealth. And my father, the retired contractor, had suddenly remembered the old family story, or perhaps found a lost hint, tried to verify it quietly, and realized the $1,000 piece of liability he'd passed off was worth millions. I thanked Lena profusely and left, the blood pounding in my ears. I drove straight back to the Mire. I didn't go to the front clearing. I went straight to the back, to the swampy, impenetrable thicket that my father had explicitly warned me about, the place he'd said was only good for sinking bulldozers. I had to see if the Celestine was really there. I fought my way through the thorny scrub until I stood directly over the area marked vein. The ground was softer here, saturated, sinking slightly beneath my boots. I noticed something I hadn't before. A small, almost perfectly circular depression, half filled with stagnant water and lined with an unusual grayish silt. It looked unnatural, almost like an old, filled-in test pit. I knelt down, plunged my hand into the thick, freezing mud, and started digging, blindly following the map's ghostly promise. After only a few minutes, my fingers brushed against something hard and sharp. I hauled it out, a fist-sized lump of rock, dark and muddy. I washed it off in the stagnant water. As the dirt cleared, the true color emerged. It wasn't the dull gray of limestone or the dark brown of iron. It was a pale, stunning sky blue, shot through with shimmering, translucent white veins. It was Celestine, and I was standing on top of a lot of it. The $1,000 I paid my father had just bought me a forgotten geological fortune. Holding that crystal in my hand, feeling the surprising heft of the Celestine, was the moment everything tilted. The Mire was no longer a personal project. It was a contested asset. My small plot of neglected land had become a potential quarry, a battleground, and a source of overwhelming anxiety. I drove home with the Celestine nugget wrapped securely in a towel, placing it in a safe deposit box the next morning. The secrecy was paramount. If Elias Kincaid felt the need to bury the discovery a century ago, I certainly couldn't risk revealing it now. A mineral deposit of this quality and size, even if the full extent was yet unknown, could easily trigger eminent domain seizures, hostile takeovers from mining companies, and, most immediately, a very difficult confrontation with my father. My relationship with him was already fraying. Since our last conversation, he had escalated his covert investigation. He wasn't calling me directly. Instead, he was using proxy maneuvers. I noticed a beat-up, unmarked pickup truck parked down the road from the Mire twice in 1 week. And then, a local land appraiser, someone I recognized from my father's business dealings, called me under the guise of updating municipal records, asking detailed, leading questions about the back acreage's stability. He was testing the waters, trying to confirm his hunch without tipping his hand. He was trying to figure out if I had found the treasure chest, or, more accurately, if I understood the significance of what the treasure chest contained. The confrontation finally came 2 weeks later, not over the phone, but in person. He showed up unannounced at my apartment, his face etched with a tension I hadn't seen since he retired. He didn't even ask for coffee. "The Mire," he began, his voice low and tight. "I need to talk to you about the sale. There was a mistake on the deed." I leaned back against the counter, crossing my arms. "A mistake? Everything was signed, sealed, and notarized, Dad. I paid you the $1,000. It's my land now. It's not about the money," he said, but his eyes betrayed him. They darted nervously, settling on the window, on anything but my face. It's about an environmental liability I forgot to disclose. A major one. The deed needs to be voided for liability protection. The poor drainage and liability were mentioned multiple times on the closing papers, I countered. I signed off on all of it. I accepted the land as is, remember? Your exact words, rain or shine, mire or miracle. He slammed his hand lightly on the counter, the sound sharp in the quiet apartment. Don't play clever with me, son. I know you found the box. My heart hammered, but I kept my face neutral. What box, Dad? I found some old iron junk that's too heavy to move. Is that what you're worried about? If it's polluting the groundwater, I'll hire a crew to haul it out. You can split the cost. His jaw tightened. He wasn't fooled. The survey maps, the old ones. You read them, didn't you? You know what Kincaid found. The way he said the name Kincaid, not Elias, but the surname, told me this wasn't just a memory of his. He hadn't forgotten about the Celestine. He had been looking for confirmation of its location, perhaps based on a cryptic note or a family legend he never took seriously until now. The $1,000 price was the perfect, cheap way to put the liability on me while he verified the coordinates. He just hadn't expected me to start digging quite so fast. I only found the chest, I lied smoothly, omitting the contents. If there are old survey maps, they belong with the chest. They're historical documents, nothing more. They are everything, he hissed, stepping closer. That vein, it's massive. I had a core sample taken from the adjacent municipal land a few years back, looking for granite. Didn't hit it. But I did hit a high concentration of strontium sulfate that made no geological sense. That was the first clue. When I realized the coordinates matched the Mire, I panicked. I sold it to you fast, hoping I could buy it back after confirming the value, using the environmental mistake as leverage. The audacity was stunning. He hadn't sold me a property. He had sold me a time bomb, hoping to detonate it and claim the spoils. You sold me 5 acres for $1,000, Dad. You gave me your word. This is my property, and any treasure on it is legally mine. The law doesn't care about a handshake when millions are on the line, he shot back. And I'm not asking. I'm telling you, you are not prepared for this. Do you know what happens when someone finds a mineral deposit on private land in this county? The industrial vultures descend. You need money for lawyers, for geotechnical reports, for security. You need leverage, and you don't have it. I have the connections. I can fight this. But only if we put the deed in a trust I control. He was offering a partnership, but one where I was clearly the junior powerless partner. The true danger of the plot was suddenly clear. It wasn't the mud, it was the greed it inspired. No, I said, firmly and clearly. The Mire is mine. I appreciate the concern, but I'll handle the vultures. I bought the land. I found the secret. I will determine its fate. His expression darkened from anxiety to raw anger. You have no idea what you're dealing with, kid. When the price of Celestine goes public, every developer in the state will have their eyes on that tiny piece of swamp. You think you can stop them with a single $1,000 receipt? You just started a war you can't win. He turned and walked out, the door slamming shut behind him. His last words hung in the air. You just started a war you can't win. He was right. I was ill-equipped. But his attempt to manipulate and scare me into handing back the land had solidified my resolve. I had the land, the crystal, the map, and the journal. Now I needed the one thing Elias Kincaid wanted to prevent: a definitive, professional geological survey. If I was going to fight the developers and my own father, I needed proof of the natural treasure's true scale. I needed to move fast before my father found a way to use the law against me. Following my father's furious departure, the atmosphere around the Mire changed from tense to overtly hostile. The unmarked truck became a regular fixture, and I knew every move I made on the property was likely being observed. The secrecy surrounding the Celestine was more critical than ever. Yet I needed hard data, geological proof, to secure my claim against any legal maneuvering my father might attempt. I couldn't use local contractors. The gossip would spread faster than a wildfire. Instead, I reached out to a specialized firm based 3 states away, one with a reputation for discretion and high-security mineral assessment. I invented a plausible cover story about exploring the feasibility of creating a large, specialized hydroponics facility that required specific deep soil temperature regulation, hence the need for non-invasive, deep-bore samples. It was a flimsy excuse, but the promise of a substantial immediate payment sealed the deal. The team arrived covertly late one evening, equipped with specialized radar and core sampling equipment, small enough to be transported by ATV. I led them straight to the back acreage, to the area marked vein on Kincaid's map. It was risky, working under the cover of darkness, battling the mud and the pervasive humidity, but the alternative, exposing the operation to daylight, was worse. The initial ground-penetrating radar, GPR scans, were immediately promising. The radar picked up a distinct, dense, non-metallic anomaly stretching beneath the swampy topsoil. It wasn't the scattered deposit of typical mineralizations. It was a continuous, structured body. The Mire's deep clay was indeed holding something massive. The geological team, led by a stern, pragmatic woman named Dr. Reyes, didn't talk much, but their focused intensity spoke volumes. They set up the drill rig over the epicenter of the anomaly, precisely where the cluster of bubbles symbol lay. The drilling was painstaking, requiring specialized casings to deal with the waterlogged earth. I stood vigil throughout the entire night, watching the slow, rhythmic churn of the drill. I had provided Kincaid's journal entries, specifically the phrases about the peculiar crystalline structure and liquid fire, to Dr. Reyes, framing them as local folklore that might hint at an unusual geological composition. She had merely raised a skeptical eyebrow, but her silence suggested she wasn't dismissing the hints outright. Around 4:00 a.m., the drill hit bedrock, and the team pulled the first core sample. It was a long, cylindrical section of the earth, cased in plastic tubing, and it was breathtaking. Dr. Reyes wiped a section clean and held it under the powerful beam of a portable light. The core transitioned sharply from gray sedimentary rock to an intensely saturated, translucent, blue and white material. It was Celestine, but not the small, fragmented crystals you usually found. This was a continuous, high-purity vein, tightly locked within the surrounding rock structure, just as Kincaid had suggested it would be. Dr. Reyes looked up at me, the first time she had held my gaze all night. Her professional detachment cracked, replaced by a look of sheer scientific astonishment. "I've never seen anything like this outside of a textbook," she whispered, her voice husky. "The purity is phenomenal. The depth and continuity suggest this isn't a pocket. This is a true primary vein. This Mire, as you call it, is sitting on a Celestine deposit that is easily measured in the tens of thousands of tons. And it is high grade. Very, very high grade." She explained the magnitude to me in layman's terms. Celestine wasn't just for fireworks anymore. It was a critical component in advanced ceramics, certain specialized magnets, and, most importantly, in the production of strontium-90, a radioisotope used in some non-reactor power sources. The industrial applications were vast, and the demand was global. "Mr. Davis," she said, using my last name for the first time, "this is not just a valuable discovery. In geological terms, this is a natural treasure. A vein this pure, this accessible, and of this volume. It elevates this 5-acre plot from mere real estate to a strategic mineral asset. The value is not just millions, it's potentially hundreds of millions of dollars, depending on the full extent we map. Hundreds of millions." The number hit me like a physical blow. I had bought this fortune for $1,000. My father, who had dismissed this land as a liability for decades, had sold me a geological gold mine simply because he hadn't had the final, critical piece of data that Elias Kincaid had so meticulously buried. The team worked until dawn, taking 2 more core samples and running a more detailed seismic survey. The results were consistent. The vein ran diagonally across the swampy 3 acres, dipping slightly beneath the municipal reserve line. But the vast majority of the easily accessible deposit was located squarely on my land, the Mire. As the sun rose, casting an eerie orange glow over the damp valley, the team packed up, their equipment vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. Dr. Reyes handed me a sealed, heavy file containing the preliminary GPR images, the core sample analysis, and a highly confidential report detailing the estimated volume and purity. "This is your leverage," she stated, tapping the file. "Keep this sealed. Do not show this to anyone until you have a legal team that specializes in mineral rights and eminent domain disputes. Because when this information gets out, and it will, you are going to need more than just a lawyer. You are going to need an army." Her caution underscored the gravity of my situation. My father's earlier warnings suddenly didn't sound like threats. They sounded like accurate predictions of the chaos that was about to unfold. I had the treasure, but now I had to defend it. And the first person I had to worry about wasn't a corporate lawyer. It was the man who had sold me this dangerous plot for $1,000, who was now desperately trying to find a way to get it back. The sealed report from Dr. Reyes sat in my safe, a time bomb ticking down to the moment I would have to make its explosive contents public. I spent the next few weeks working feverishly to construct an impenetrable legal defense, using the report's data to inform my strategy without revealing the hard numbers. I secured a high-powered law firm that specialized in mineral rights litigation, just as Dr. Reyes recommended, and their initial reaction upon viewing the heavily redacted geological data was one of stunned approval. My father, meanwhile, had reached a fever pitch of desperation. He transitioned from veiled threats to direct action. He filed a lawsuit attempting to void the sale, citing fraudulent misrepresentation of liability and non-disclosure of latent defects by the seller, a bizarre legal pretzel that tried to argue he had somehow been defrauded by me when I found the treasure he didn't know was there. It was a clear attempt to force a settlement, or, at the very least, tie up the property in litigation until he could confirm the Celestine's true value. I countered his lawsuit immediately, armed with the knowledge of Elias Kincaid's journal and my own survey. I didn't disclose the Celestine, but I exposed his true intent. The defendant, Frank Davis, is attempting to void a fully executed, notarized deed based on speculative and unverified claims, purely motivated by his recent discovery of historical data suggesting a potentially valuable, yet unconfirmed, natural deposit on the property. He sold the land as is, for a nominal fee, and is now attempting to repurchase it based on an internal, speculative family dispute over historical knowledge. The legal battle became public, attracting local media attention. The narrative spun by the press was irresistible. The retired contractor trying to reclaim the swampy land he sold to his own son for a pittance, hinting at a hidden fortune. They called it the $1,000 Swamp War. This intense public scrutiny brought the attention of the real vultures Dr. Reyes warned about. A massive multinational mining corporation, Ethel Resources, recognized the geological markers being discussed in the legal filings. They knew the area's historical mineral potential. Within days, they descended. They didn't buy the adjacent land. They didn't even file a lawsuit. They sent me an offer. It was a staggering, non-negotiable cash amount for the mineral rights alone, allowing me to retain surface ownership of the Mire. The number was colossal, far exceeding the initial hundreds of millions Dr. Reyes estimated. It was structured as a long-term lease with massive royalties, specifically designed to bypass litigation and discourage my father from continuing his fight. The offer was so high, so fast, and so legally airtight that my own lawyers urged me to accept it immediately. The decision was complex. Elias Kincaid had buried the Celestine to protect the land from industry and folly. Selling the mineral rights to Ethel would ensure the land was eventually quarried, destroying the Mire's ecosystem. But retaining the rights meant fighting an endless war against a massive corporation and my own father, a fight I would eventually lose, possibly ending in the government seizing the land through eminent domain for a fraction of its worth. I realized I couldn't preserve the land and gain financial freedom simultaneously. I had to choose the lesser of two evils. I accepted Ethel's offer. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. My father dropped his lawsuit the moment the Ethel contract was filed with the county. He didn't call. He didn't appear. The money rendered his legal argument that the property's true value was unknowingly misrepresented null and void. The value was now public, and it belonged to me. 3 months after the Ethel deal closed, I used a fraction of the initial payment to buy my father a beautiful new house in a warmer climate, transferring the deed in his name without comment. He refused to speak to me, but he moved in 2 weeks later. The $1,000 transaction, the biggest turning point of my life, had permanently fractured our relationship, replacing familial connection with the uncomfortable reality of sudden, massive wealth. As for the Mire, the dangerous plot is now a massive, heavily secured construction zone. Ethel is mobilizing, preparing for extraction. The ecosystem Kincaid tried to save and the swamp I once planned to build a small cabin on will soon be gone, replaced by a quarry that will supply high-demand minerals globally for decades. I kept Kincaid's journal and the original map. I often look at the word vein and wonder about the moral cost of uncovering a natural treasure. I set up an environmental foundation dedicated to protecting wetlands, funded by the royalty payments, feeling the strange weight of using the profits from one environmental loss to prevent others. My life is unrecognizable now. I retired from the tech job, bought a beautiful plot of land nowhere near any swamp or mineral deposit, and finally built that workshop I always wanted. The simple act of construction, working with my hands, is my penance and my peace. I bought 5 acres for $1,000. It cost me a handshake, a family tie, and the quiet dignity of a forgotten piece of land. But in return, I discovered a natural treasure that changed everything. The Mire was dangerous, not for its mud, but for the ruthless, corrosive power of its secret. And I am left with a profound truth. Some of the most valuable things on Earth are buried deep, and sometimes they are best left there.